Ah yes, Sonic the Hedgehog. Whether you love him or hate him, there's a high chance you've run into the blue ball spiky boy at some point in the past, and even may have come across people online with a lot of very strong and varying opinions on his titles. The phrases, Sonic has had a rough transition into 3D, or Sonic the Hedgehog was never good, are some of the more common lines that I come across during my browsing of the old cheeky Super Network highway. However, due to the 30th anniversary of the series, happy birthday by the way, you magnificent blue bastard you, I have played through a good chunk of this franchise back last year on Twitch.tv, and I would like to offer my own thoughts on this series and try to point out exactly why I love this franchise to a potentially unhealthy degree, while also offering some criticisms along the way. Now, not absolutely every game will be covered in the series, but I'm going to be covering pretty much everything that I'm able to. Some may call me mad for this, and they're probably right, but hey, I'm going to cover the vast majority of the Sonic franchise and talk about a ridiculous number of games. Let's get right into the 30 years of Sonic the Hedgehog. It's 1991 and Nintendo is dominating the video game market, and our mad lads at Sega had to create something in order to combat the video game giant. So they elected to create a new super radical new mascot in order to take up the challenge. Some development later and boom, Sonic the Hedgehog is born. Sonic the Hedgehog was the new high-energy, extreme game featuring our blue boy with an attitude, featuring blazing speeds, imaginative environments, and music that can be best described as absolute bangers. Sega utilized this game in order to take on the very best of the best, Super Mario, and to try to defeat him at his own game. Now, whether they succeeded or not is honestly down to personal taste, but this one game shifted the video game market forever and kickstarted an absolute behemoth of a franchise. So how is the game? Well, I'm about to tell you. Sonic the Hedgehog is a fast-paced action platformer in which you must utilize unique momentum-based movement in order to power through a large variety of zones in order to stop the evil Dr. Eggman, or Dr. Robotnik for us in the West back in the day, from taking hold of the resident animals on South Island and transforming them into evil killing machines. The gameplay of this one essentially consists of collecting rings, bopping Eggman's robots, and trying to get to the end of each zone safely within a reasonably speedy manner. Though while this game was advertised to have blistering speeds, chances are your first playthrough of this may actually be pretty slow. And this is because the speed is essentially a reward for playing well. The more you understand the level design, explore and work out all the different routes you can take and master the general movement, the faster that you complete the game. Of course, because of the unique approach to the gameplay here, a traditional Mario-styled health system may have been deemed a little too punishing. You will definitely run into a lot of shit on your first playthrough, and as such, Sega elected to replace a basic power-up system, or a traditional HP-based one, with a system surrounding rings. Throughout each of the zones offered in the game, there are hundreds of rings that you're able to collect, which serve a dual purpose. 1. Keep Sonic alive, and 2. Gain access to a special zone at the end of an act. So long as you have access to at least one ring at any given time, Sonic himself will not die. Unless he gets crushed, drowns, falls down a pit, or lands on a spike multiple times, because there is an annoying as hell bug where spikes ignore invincibility frames in the earlier versions of the game. If you get hit while holding rings, you will lose all of them, regardless of how many you have collected, and they will scatter about everywhere, allowing you to quickly scramble like mad in order to pick them back up. And because of this, I honestly find this system to be simultaneously straightforward and accessible, and it definitely helps newcomers ease into the new gameplay styles. It also allows for a fantastic challenge in regards to accessing the special zones. Collect and keep 50 rings up until the end of an act, and boom! Sonic will get whisked away to one of the 6 special zones in order to try and access one of the mysterious Chaos Emeralds. Essentially, these stages are all mazes that constantly rotate, and the player has to navigate Sonic by jumping at the correct intervals and manipulate his position as best as they can. And while these are pretty cool, I find these to be admittedly, a gigantic pain in the ass. And the control is just off enough to be frustrating to me. In fact, I sometimes feel like it's pot luck whether or not I succeed or fail. So that said, what do you get if you receive all 6 Chaos Emeralds, you might ask? Well, you get flowers at the ending sequence. Whoa. Okay, not exactly the best reward, but hey, at least it means you can ignore the Chaos Emeralds if you really don't care about the special zones. I find the general level design in this game as well to be a bit of a mixed bag in some regards, and a lot of that is clearly because the developers are trying out different things to get a feel of what works best in this gameplay style. So the levels would go from super fast-paced stages such as Green Hill or Starlight Zone, to more slower platform-oriented levels like Marble or Labyrinth. Oy. None of these are badly designed by any means, though you will probably be blindsided by a lot of enemies and obstacles on your first run through, so it could be frustrating at times. But they are very inconsistent in terms of game feel. One moment you're doing super fast paced sequences, and the next you're pushing blocks slowly and waiting to get across lava pits. At the end of each zone you'll also get to face off against Dr. Eggman in a one-on-one duel, as he utilizes a unique mech to battle. And these bosses are pretty good fun for the most part, offering a fair challenge for newcomers while being completely easy to annihilate upon playing the game multiple times. And they can be pretty satisfying to beat, to be honest. I'd also be remiss to not bring up the bloody magnificent soundtrack, which is composed by Masato Nakamura of the band Dreams Come True, which is, well, as I said, is magnificent all around. Overall, Sonic the Hedgehog is a fantastic game through and through, and I heavily recommend it to anyone to give it a chance. It is a fun, frantic, and challenging game that is pretty much nearly infinitely replayable due to the joy of just mastering the controls and level design, allowing for a fantastic sense of flow or rhythm. After the success of Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Mega Drive, most people would assume that Sega's next step is of course to release a direct sequel. However, this isn't exactly what happened. Sega wanted the Blue Blur to also grace their Sega Game Gear system, and as such, the 8-bit Sonic the Hedgehog was brought to the market as a companion piece to the original Mega Drive title, with a Sega Master System version being brought alongside with it. This title operates reasonably similar to the original game, however the biggest differences are in regards to the general movement of Sonic, as the title was handled by a separate developer this time around, that developer being Ancient. And this title plays a little bit closer to a more traditional platformer with less emphasis over momentum when compared to the Mega Drive original, and pretty much offers a completely unique experience with brand new level designs, as well as totally new zones being introduced. In fact, when compared to the Mega Drive version, outright I find the level design in this one to be a little bit more balanced. It feels like the developers had a more clear idea of what they wanted the game to be. While the absolute basic ideas of the gameplay are still present here, this title handles certain specifics as the Chaos Emeralds in its own way completely. No longer are these hyper-powerful gems of energy stored on their own special stage. They are in fact located within the levels themselves as an extra collectible to explore and uncover for yourself, promoting a bigger emphasis on exploring compared to the absolute original title. Special stages are not completely removed, however. Instead, they are merely retooled into a bouncy castle-esque location, in which you will be able to amass a ridiculous number of rings for extra lives, as well as conch boxes that offer you additional continues in the event you lose all your lives and get a game over. One thing I must talk about in particular is that the soundtrack in this version of Sonic 1 is just as amazing as the original, with plenty of unique standout tunes. And my usual go-to examples include the fantastic Bridge Zone theme, and the end credits theme, which are both, in my personal opinion, absolute bangers. One thing I should highlight about the 8-bit Sonic 1, however, is that the game is a slightly different experience depending on whether or not you play it on the Master System or the Game Gear. Playing this one through on the Game Gear results in a hefty screen crunch, and some of the game design is slightly different to account for this. A big example is Jungle Zone Act 2, where the Master System version suffers from a programming quirk where every platform that goes off screen simply doesn't exist anymore, making the whole zone essentially become a giant pit. This quirk isn't present in the Game Gear release. Honestly, even though this version is looked down upon by some folks as the inferior version, if I'm to be honest, it holds up extremely well today and I wholly recommend it. It's very solidly designed in my opinion, it's just heaps of fun to play. Well, except for Labyrinth Zone, that's actually worse to play in this version. Ugh. After the hit that was the initial Sonic the Hedgehog titles, the next step was, as you can guess, is to make a sequel. Though oddly enough, the first version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to be released was the Sega Master System and Game Gear version, which was developed by Aspect. Being an 8-bit release, this is significantly closer in style to the 8-bit version of Sonic 1. However, unlike that title, I find this particular one to be much more annoying to deal with in regards to the level design, as things are just much trickier to manage this time around. In fact, the level design in this game is pretty well known for being notoriously mean in a number of instances. The most well-known example to prove my point is the first boss of the game. Dr. Eggman saves you from a burning fate, and starts dropping balls onto you, whilst a robot awaits on the right to nom on your corpse. Now in the Master System version, this is a tough but not terrible boss. The big difficulty of this one comes in when you apply the same boss battle to the Game Gear release. Screen crunch a go-go, baby! And on top of that, the balls bounce at varying heights on the Game Gear version, making things super frustrating throughout. Generally, in terms of the level design, this one I'm very mixed on. Some sections I find to be pretty fun, while others can come across as more of a frustrating annoyance. Though the level themes this time around are pretty neat though. One of the weird things about this release, however, is that while this is the unveiling of Tails for the first time as being a front and center character, he is not playable in the slightest and is only seen during the beginning and ending of the game, as well as for the title cards of each of the game's zones, which is admittedly really cool. I don't know, I really like that. Overall though, this isn't a Sonic game I normally recommend to most. If you're a fan of the series, it's worth checking out, but in regards to newcomers, this isn't the strongest title and it may be too frustrating for a lot of players. Now for this next game, I gotta give full disclosure. This is without a doubt my favourite game in the series. And also probably one of the most important games to me personally, as I have many memories attached to it. Some of which being some of my earliest, as this, ladies and gentlemen, is the first game I have memory of ever playing. So what is Sonic 2? Well, it's obviously the sequel to the original game. However, it takes a lot of the elements that worked in the original game and smoothed out the level design significantly, resulting in a much more consistent experience. While Sonic 1 felt very stop and go at times due to the fact that the game was clearly trying to figure out what worked and what didn't, Sonic 2 offers much less of a focus on raw, block-focused platforming, and puts an even greater emphasis on having a level design in which you can flow smoothly from one challenge to the next at a fairly speedy rate. To commemorate the sequel to, Sonic utilizes a brand new ability in the form of the Spin Dash. This handy move will allow the blue pincushion to rev up into a ball and shoot off at a pretty nippy pace, allowing you to get back up to speed quickly in the event that something slows down your momentum. Introduced into the gameplay for the first time too is Miles Tails Prower, who is returning from the Master System version of the game. However, he is no more than a character skin this time around. Though I say that, by default Tails will follow Sonic in a semi-co-op sense, where he will trail behind mimicking your movements, sometimes resulting in your unfortunate demise on occasion. But one very cool feature of this game this time around is also the ability to give a second controller to another player so that they can help you out via Tails. The camera won't stay on the fox, so 9 times out of 10 he'll probably just be off screen and vanish. But this shines in boss battles where Sonic can just sit idly by and just let Tails do all the hard work. Special stages make a return yet again, and this time the way they are accessed is a little different. Instead of simply reaching the end of a stage with 50 rings to gain entry, the method has been made significantly easier. All you have to do now is grab 50 rings, hit a checkpoint, and this will send you to a half pipe in which you will need to grab the required number of rings and reach the end of the course without getting booped by the bombs along the way. And this special stage is... well, honestly, I love it. But it is a trope that gets reused quite a fair bit in the series, and this first integration of the idea is a little rough due to the limitations of the time. The biggest problem with it stems from the fact it can be super hard to see what's coming up in front of you. Also, one bit of advice to new players too, if any of you want the Chaos Emeralds, do not bring Tails into these special stages. The difficulty spikes up a tad as the game goes into co-op mode essentially, and it pumps up the ring requirements to get the emerald. Though the reward for collecting the 7 Chaos Emeralds this time around is much sweeter. You gain the ability to transform into Super Sonic, a golden invincible form that essentially allows you to plow through the game with ease. Well, for the most part. Your momentum and movement speed greatly increases in this form. So while you're invincible and can essentially destroy the level design, simple platforming becomes quite the challenge. Also new to this is a 2-player versus mode in which you and a friend can race through a number of select zones and special stages in order to be the first to clear the level, as well as a number of other categories which the player clears the most of will be deemed the winner. It's not a feature many people remember much from the game, but it's a neat little extra bonus that can definitely be pretty fun to play with a friend. My biggest real complaint with this mode can't be played across the entire game. It's only a vertical slice of levels available, which is a tad disappointing. Overall though, this is without a doubt my favourite game in the series, and it's probably the game I played the most out of them all. And a good part of this is probably due to nostalgia. However, I do genuinely believe this is an improvement over the original in every single way, and offers a very accessible experience. In fact, if there's a game in the series that I would recommend to first timers who are interested in the classic gameplay, this will probably be the game that I point to. It's nice and casual compared to the first release, and offers a very nice difficulty balance. During the development of Sonic 2, a second Sonic game was also in production for the Mega CD. And this title serves essentially as an alternative Sonic 2 in a way in regards to how it was developed, and is essentially a more explorative take on the Sonic gameplay as opposed to the more speed-driven platforming as seen in the mainline entry. Right from the get-go in playing this one, you see the advantages of the CD hardware, as the game opens on a really awesome FMV cinematic animated by good old Toei Animation. This looks pretty rough by today's standards, but if you play the post-Mega CD versions of this game, such as the Taxman port, the FMV really shines and holds up fantastically. Sonic CD's general gameplay is your typical Sonic the Hedgehog affair for the most part. However, the big differentiator with things this time around is the brand new time travel mechanic. Essentially, every single zone in the game is built with a past, a present, and a future version that the player can jump between whenever they access one of the many new time travel posts that are littered throughout the level. One touch of these time travel posts and Sonic will start to get a sparkling effect, and when this happens, Sonic will have to run in a straight line without interruption for a couple of seconds in order to be whisked away to a different time period, which offers different art, music, and level design tweaks. Also, additionally added to Sonic's movement is the ability to utilize a super peel out. Simply hold up and jump, and Sonic can blast off at full speed. Honestly, I don't see any reason to use this over the spin dash though, to be perfectly honest, but it looks cool. The time travel mechanic, many will also look at it and go, what's the point in time traveling if I could just progress to the level normally? And the answer to this question lies in the reason that Sonic has to time travel. Essentially, every single act has a roboticized machine hidden somewhere, and it is up to you, the player, to look for and destroy the dastardly machine. Doing so in every act of a zone will then create a good future, which the player can travel to, and is also forced to visit in each boss battle. These good future variants offer a pretty cool look into the world after it's been saved from Dr. Robotnik's clutches, and generally feature a lovely melding of nature and machines all working in harmony. If the player fails to destroy the machine, however, they will get a grim look at the world devastated by the good doctor. As an idea, it's honestly pretty cool, and I do dig the attempt to change things up conceptually a bit. However, the time travel mechanic to me just comes across more as a simple gimmick, and it's placed in largely to justify the more explorative oriented level design. And I gotta be honest, I've never actually got the good ending in this game from destroying these things. Personally, it's an undertaking that I just don't really want to take on due to how the level design is, which I'll get a little bit more in depth with in a bit. If players want the good ending and don't want to bother to look for and destroy the roboticizers, however, then thankfully the devs were pretty merciful and they offered the ability to collect the 7 time stones in a more traditional fashion in order to automatically get all the good features in the game. These are collected the same way as the Chaos Emeralds are in Sonic 1. Collect 50 rings, jump into the giant ring at the end of an act, and boom! Clear the special stage to get the time stone. And yes, there are no Chaos Emeralds this time around. The special stages in this one are also quite cool, however, clearly taking advantage of the Mega CD hardware. You must run through the pseudo 3D Mode 7 sort of environment in order to destroy all of the UFOs within a set time limit. These special stages, while I find to be fun, definitely can have their fair share of frustration at points, as you're always moving forward, causing some small difficulties maneuvering from time to time. And I feel the hitboxes on the UFOs are fairly jank. There's many moments where I feel like I should have hit the thing, only for Sonic to just clip through or fly straight past harmlessly, which causes things to get a tad annoying to say the least. On top of that too, you must watch out for the water on the floors of each of the special stage, as stepping on one of these panels will greatly drain your remaining time. The one cool benefit to these special stages is that the game is honestly fairly merciful with time. This is largely due to the fact that when you start to run low on your time, a special UFO will appear, and if you destroy it, it will bump your time limit back up a small amount. And this special UFO continuously respawns too, so as long as you don't mess up too badly, you can essentially stay in the special stage for as long as you need. As I already mentioned, the level design is a lot more explorative oriented this time around, and it really wants the player to go out of their way, as opposed to just going straight to the end of the levels. In theory, this is a fine idea, and I know some folks will disagree with me on this, but I don't like the level design for the most part this time around. The big reasoning is a lot of the levels just feel like they are deliberately obtrusive and annoying to navigate to me, sometimes as a result of a gimmick, such as the case with Wacky Workbench Zone. Good lord, I dislike that level. And sometimes because the level feels like, and pardon my French here, a massive clusterfuck of objects. Don't get me wrong though, there are some levels in this game I do like. I don't find them all bad. In fact, I really do enjoy playing a fair couple of them. Like the first zone is a ton of fun, for instance. I also really enjoy the final level too. Soundtrack, as always here, is a bop also. But what's kind of unique about this title is it offers 2 separate official soundtracks. A worldwide, more Sonic-y melodic soundtrack, and a more ambient American soundtrack. Both of these are honestly worth a listen, and while I personally prefer the worldwide soundtrack, I can't really knock the quality of the American one. Overall though, I find this title to be a bit of a mixed bag. I don't hate the game by any means, but it feels like quite a letdown in the level design department for me. I do enjoy my time with it, but I always find myself put off from doing full playthroughs of the game due to the more annoying stages. I can't knock the presentation though, because good lord, it's a pretty and stylish game. Returning to the Master System Game Gear 8-bit Sonic releases, here we have the first title of these to include Tails as a playable character, as well as to give Sonic his patented spin dash ability, as well as offer the Super Peel Out, which makes its grand return from Sonic CD. And this time around, the focus on the gameplay is on rings, because you can never have too many rings, am I right? Essentially, this title for me feels like the first 8-bit release to be designed with the capabilities of the Game Gear in mind specifically. And that's because in this one, the levels themselves are actually very, very tiny, and pretty much a lot of them can be completed in less than a minute if you head straight for the goal. But to make up for that are essentially the Chaos Emeralds, which have their own method for accessing that is unique to this title. Basically, you collect 100 rings in an act, and then boom! You skip the rest of the stage and you plop into one of the special stages for your chance to get one of these mystical gems. Though weirdly enough, the special stages in this one are handled a little more like a neat challenge course, as opposed to being largely a gimmick like in the Sonic 2 Half-Pipe. This approach I do like, but I think I prefer the more unique gameplay of the special stages in previous Sonic titles over what is offered here, which is essentially a bit more platforming or a maze within a time limit. These are overall pretty short and fun enough though, and honestly don't have too much challenge other than find the correct approach to clear within the time. The only one of these that is really annoying in fact is the final Chaos Emerald, which involves you flinging through a pipe maze, and it's a gameplay gimmick I honestly detest, to be perfectly frank. For the standard level design of the game though, as I previously mentioned, it's not too bad, and it's pretty quick and easy to run through, but it can be super annoying to go for the 100 rings if you don't know what you're doing through the levels, as they can be filled with traps that are very easy to stumble into. What I really dislike about this game, however, is just the collision detection, largely in regards to when you're collecting rings, and this is due to the fact I just find that Sonic doesn't always collect the rings when I expect him to, which is mildly annoying to be perfectly honest. Other than that though, what I mentioned here, there's not really much else to this title. There's some cool level themes here and there, it's fairly competent level design, and as a quick, easy pick up and play Sonic title, it does the job and is fairly fun. But if I'm to be honest, I don't think this is a game that's going to blow anyone away. It's just a safe little portable title. In between the wait between Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Sonic 3, Sega Technical Institute was commissioned to make yet another Sonic game to be released in order to capitalize on the booming success of the franchise. As a result of this, the first technical spin-off game in the series was created, Sonic Spinball. This is the first release to deviate from the standard Sonic formula that everyone is used to and is instead a pinball adventure game. Every stage in this is essentially a gigantic pinball table that the player must navigate and explore in order to obtain each of the many, many Chaos Emeralds that are littered about in order to open up all of the routes that lead to each level's main boss. The game this time around hasn't got all that many levels in particular to traverse, offering only 4 zones to bounce around like an absolute maniac. Obviously each level gets more and more difficult than the last, and if I'm to be perfectly honest, this is a game I do enjoy and have fond memories of when growing up. That said, it's supremely challenging. A lot of the later zones, more specifically the final one, you'll be fighting with the controls in order to get where you want to go. Generally, the controls in this are somewhat weighty as it goes, and as a result of that, movement can feel very stiff. If you go into this game expecting one-to-one pinball mechanics, then you will be disappointed. A big upside to how the controls work, however, is that you are able to manipulate Sonic's direction ever so slightly by pressing left or right on the D-pad. Despite this, however, I find that it can be very frustrating at times to get Sonic to go exactly where you want him to. After each zone is cleared via beating one of the admittedly terrifying bosses, you'll be whisked into a bonus stage which offers more pinball-based gameplay. Though weirdly enough, the gameplay in these feels a lot more like a standard pinball than the base games in terms of physics. The whole game oozes a dark and grim atmosphere too, and in terms of visual, really stands out from the typical Sonic fare. To fit in with that too is a darker, more grungy sounding soundtrack, which honestly sounds pretty dang cool. Outside of the dreadful options menu, that is, oh god lord. Overall, this game is a pretty fun time and I do recommend it. However, I do so with a warning that the controls do take some getting used to, and overall, the game can honestly be an excruciatingly frustrating task to complete. Following the release of Sonic Spinball, the next entry is yet another spin-off title. However, this one is even further removed from the previous ones in regards to the gameplay of the original Sonic games. This time around, the spin-off is that of a peculiar little puzzle game in which the player must stack up groups of 4 beans of the same colour in a row in order to clear out the field, all the while setting up bean stack combos to attack opponents' fields with garbage beans to impede their progress. Anyone listening to this right now may immediately think to themselves, this sounds like Puyo! And they would be right, this spin-off is basically just Puyo Puyo outright reskinned with a design similar to the TV series Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. The big highlight for this game, outside of the Dr. Robotnik theme however, is the sheer difficulty. The game really asks a lot of the little player, and it gets stupid hard as you progress through the levels. Or I'm just awful at it. I'm not exactly a puzzle game connoisseur. Of course, you can also play this game in multiplayer too if you have friends on standby willing to hop in. Honestly, I can recommend this game to Puyo fans. Largely, it's just Puyo Puyo, so, you know, it's just got different visuals. But for everyone else, it depends on their personal taste. But I honestly find Puyo Puyo to be a super fun puzzle series that, at the very least, I recommend folks to give a look at. The next game in the franchise, however, is one heck of a doozy. After the success of the original 2 mainline Sonic games, as you can imagine, Sega wanted to knock things out of the park with the 3rd entry. And if I'm going to be honest, oh boy did they knock it out of the park. This entry follows the same general formula as the original 2 titles. However, now we have another additional character to deal with in the form of Knuckles the Echidna, whom of which is working alongside our pal Dr. Eggman in order to keep Sonic away from the mystical Master Emerald that powers his island. The best way I can really explain this entry in the series is with the word expanded. Everything this time around has been expanded, so as you can imagine, that means bigger zones, bigger graphics. Generally, everything this time around is bigger and more detailed. Heck, there's even a bigger emphasis on plot this time around with the introduction of cutscene cinematics that are used sparingly to show the events of Sonic's journey, all of which are masterfully done at conveying the story with no need for any written dialogue whatsoever. All that you need to understand what is going on is shown through the background scenery and character behaviour, and it's honestly pretty dang impressive. The special stages in this one have also been changed up yet again. For this title, with what is possibly one of the most accessible systems yet. Simply put, there are a number of gigantic special stage rings littered about each zone. Simply jump into one of these for a chance to get a Chaos Emerald. And the special stages themselves all work on a pseudo 3D environment, in which you must run throughout this spherical planet in order to grab all of the blue spheres that are sitting on the floor, all the while avoiding touching the red ones. And these for me I find to be the easiest out of the special stage in the original trilogy. And honestly, with a little bit of trial and error, I believe most players would be able to get the hang of them in absolutely no time. Much like with Sonic 2, the reward for getting the emeralds is the power of Super Sonic. Although, much like in the second game, when the player plays as Tails, you lose out on the ability because of reasons. New abilities to the main character's arsenal this time around also includes the new, brand spanking new Insta Shield ability for Sonic, which is essentially a dinky little shield that you can activate for a split second that allows you to dodge certain enemy attacks while also simultaneously offering you an extra little bit of range to attack. Young me was a little bit of an idiot when it comes to this ability, to be honest, and I used to write it off as useless. But seriously, I couldn't be further from the truth with it. It's a very, very handy tool. Tails also got a bit of an upgrade this time around too, as now he is rocking the ability to fly, allowing players to easily get past certain platforming challenges, as well as explore different areas with ease. This essentially makes Tails the easy mode of the game, but I think it's a welcome addition to his abilities, and it's honestly just super fun to use. Going back to how massive a game Sonic 3 is, however, the game during development was actually split up into 2 halves, the second half being an alternative game titled Sonic and Knuckles. The title was pretty unique in how it works, as it was essentially an expansion cartridge that you were able to slot Sonic 3 into in order to create one big, massive behemoth of a title. When you include and Knuckles into the package, the game transforms into the mighty Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which offers multiple extra zones taken from the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge, as well as offer Knuckles himself to be a playable character. When you play as Knuckles 2, the game is essentially a completely different experience, as not only do you have a unique moveset, the level layouts also have different routes to accommodate to, and you even have a completely different endgame to progress through. In terms of abilities, our favourite Red Buffoon has the ability to glide from area to area, as well as climb up walls, and due to his gigantic fists, he can simply run through walls that Sonic or Tails would normally either not be able to progress through at all, or would have to spin dash through. On top of that, the and Knuckles expansion even adds an extra 7 special stages to complete, with a brand new set of emeralds to obtain, and if you are able to get all 14 of these, then Sonic and Knuckles will both be able to transform into their hyper forms to cause maximum carnage. Speaking of carnage, while Tails can't turn super with the 7 Chaos Emeralds, with 14 other things, he becomes what can be best described as an absolute juggernaut of death, as he basically amasses an army of Flicky birds to go out and annihilate everything in the level. The soundtrack this time around is also an absolute bop too, though that goes without saying, to be honest, given the rest of the franchise. Much like with Sonic 2 as well, this game offers a 2-player mode in which you are able to go face to face against a friend through various uniquely made tracks. And if I'm to be perfectly honest, however, I find this mode to be pretty underwhelming, as the tracks are all super tiny and, truth be told, not the most fun thing in the world to run through. It's a cool little distraction, but outside of curiosity's sake, I'd say it's really not worth bothering with, and honestly, I wish it took Sonic 2's approach instead of offering the mainline levels to race in, as opposed to these little bite-sized courses that you take laps around. Overall, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, as I've said, is a supremely massive title, and for many it's considered to be the best game in the series. And if I'm to be honest, while that spot is held by Sonic 2 for me personally, I think this game is definitely worthy of that title too. So if you ask me if I recommend this one, well of course. It's a magnificent title through and through, and I struggle to really come up with any real negatives, to be frank. Heck, for any folks who actually own the and Knuckles cartridge too, if they enjoy the special stages, you can insert any Mega Drive game into the thing and play more of them. And for owners of Sonic 1, well, if you place that into the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge, while it doesn't let you play Sonic 1 with Knuckles, it does indeed give you access to 134,217,728 special stages that you can run through. Yes, I'm dead serious. There's that many special stages you can run through. It's nuts. As an even additional bonus too, if you place Sonic 2 into the and Knuckles cartridge, you can even play Sonic 2 as Knuckles the Echidna also. Moving back into the realm of 8-bit systems, now we have a spin-off on the Sega Game Gear. Sonic Drift is essentially a simple kart racing game in which you pick a character and blast through one of the Grand Prix available in order to become the winner, of course, and become the champion. There's not really too much to say about this one, honestly, as it's a pretty bare bones and basic racer. Essentially, all you do is you drive through the tracks, you pick up power-ups and rings in order to boost past your opposition, and Bob's your uncle. The playable roster of this one, however, lets you play as Sonic, Tails, Eggman, and Amy, and each of the characters handle pretty much exactly the same, with the sole exception of their unique special move that can be pulled off by using rings that you pick up along the course. Honestly, I don't really have much to say about this game, or can't really recommend it outside of sheer curiosity. Unless, of course, you have access to it via a game collection or something. It's not bad by any means, but it's pretty barren and honestly very inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, and it's just a very forgettable release. Though technically this is the first title in the series where you can play as Dr. Eggman himself, so I guess it's got that going for it, I suppose, but yeah, there's really nothing to say here. It's a racing game. It's very... You kind of know what to expect looking at it. What you see is what you get. Sonic Triple Trouble is a title that is generally considered to be a fan favourite amongst the Game Gear Sonic releases. There's really not too much to talk about with the base design of this game, as it follows the traditional Sonic formula to a T for the most part, in terms of the general gameplay. Although what stands out in this particular game is the introduction of a fan favourite character, Fang the Sniper, who is after the Chaos Emeralds purely for monetary gain. Though what is interesting is you won't run into him during the main adventure. Instead, his appearances all involve the new special stages, which you can access when you acquire 50 rings, as well as hit one of the hidden Chaos Emerald item monitors that are littered amongst each zone. The special stages this time around take two specific forms, the first of which are platforming challenges in which you must progress to the end of the stage within a time limit, and these can be pretty tricky and precise in all honesty, and do require a little bit of memorization to be able to get through without too much hassle. The second of the special stages have you piloting Sonic's plane in order to collect tons of rings in order to obtain the Chaos Emerald at the end. It's pretty simple stuff. In fact, it's so simple that I've never actually failed one of these. One of the cool things about the approach of the special stages here, however, is that during the end, you can end up in a battle against an optional boss in the form of Fang, which is pretty easy and honestly rather fun. Other than that though, I really don't have too much to say about this one. It's a pretty standard Sonic adventure for the most part, outside of a couple of cool moments here and there. A moment I find really cool, for instance, happens in the second zone, where there's a rather smooth transition from Act 2 into Act 3 with a bop of a music track. Although it is a fun ride, truth be told, and while this likely won't wow anyone, it's a fine enough romp that I can easily recommend to people. So while I didn't have much to say about Sonic Triple Trouble or Sonic Drift, well, I have even less to talk about here, as this game is pretty much Sonic Drift again, but more, if that makes any sense. Now don't get me wrong, there's improvements over the original title here, but there's really nothing special about this one. Some cool upgrades to the presentation with more dynamic tracks and more playable races, but otherwise, it's fine enough as a game, but I can't really recommend this one outside of sheer curiosity. This next title is a pretty interesting one, as it was released on Sega's infamous 32X peripheral. Knuckles Chaotix is the first 32-bit entry in the Sonic the Hedgehog series, and oh boy, it's a pretty one, offering extremely detailed sprite work and visual effects that could otherwise be either impossible on a base Mega Drive, or at the very least, incredibly difficult to pull off. As the name implies, however, this game isn't starring our blue boy Sonic. In fact, he's nowhere to be found anywhere this time around, barring the end credits. This is Knuckles' show, folks, as he must work with Chaotix's crew in order to collect a number of Chaos Rings. Yes, that's right, not emeralds this time, we're collecting rings. In order to defeat the dreaded Dr. Eggman and Metal Sonic. The gameplay of this one takes the general Sonic style, but adds a gimmick over the top of things in the form of the Combi Ring system. This system links your playable character and a partner character together via a magnetic sort of chain, allowing you to either A, pinball uncontrollably throughout the environment, or B, do some admittedly cool maneuvers to progress through each of the game's levels. This mechanic does take a lot of getting used to properly, and honestly it's one of the most biggest standout features of the game, while simultaneously being one of the most divisive. I personally don't mind it too much, but I do feel it can make things very dizzying at times. Another difference with this one is also the fact that there's no natural progression to each of the zones or acts. Whatever level you access is pretty much completely random and accessed via a roulette. Unless there's a way to manipulate things, but if there is, I have yet to find it. On top of that too, the number of acts per zone have been bumped up from the usual 2 acts to a whopping 5. Which is a bit of a problem in its own right, as I find each location you're traversing through wears out its welcome really early on into the game. Now this issue could be mitigated a little by the level design in general if it's good enough. However, unfortunately, that's
not really the case. The level design is best described as, well, it's not awful, but it's very underwhelming and kind of boring, to be perfectly honest. And sometimes I find it even awkward to figure out which direction is the correct way to go. The special stages in this one are honestly also pretty cool, and they're activated from the Sonic 1 method of entry. Reach the end of level 50 rings and boom. However, you're incentivized to get more rings this time around, as the total number of rings you have when you enter the special stage become your time limit. So the more rings you have, the more chance of victory you also have as a result. The way these special stages work are quite simple, honestly. Essentially, you run along a 3D track where you're able to run around the walls, all the while collecting blue spheres, and while trying to avoid spike balls and pits that are also littered about. I know a fair few people aren't a fan of these, but honestly, I enjoy them. They're pretty unique in the series, and outside of some jank, which I'm sure is the result of system limitations at the time, I find they're fairly well designed and challenging. Another cool feature too is that you can play this completely in 2-player co-op, which I have yet to try myself. Overall though, I find this one to be a pretty hard one to recommend, honestly, because, well, while it's a pretty unique entry, it's also the sort of game that really drags on and overstays its welcome pretty quickly unless you play it in short bursts. Also, pro tip, if you want to break this game, play as Charmy. You can literally fly past everything in the game. Continuing on with the spin-off titles that aren't starring the Blue Blur himself, here we have a curious game starring everyone's favourite fox, Miles Tails Prower, in his own bite-sized little adventure to stop the evil Wendy Witch cart on the Sega Game Gear. The gameplay of this one is quite unique in that rather than being a pretty traditional platformer, this is closer to a spaceship shooter in its design. You must maneuver through a couple of obstacle courses, all the while dodging everything in your way to make your way to each boss in order to boop them and be victorious, of course. The design of this one is honestly super simple, so there's not much I can really say about it. You move forward on your own, all the while grabbing all the items in your path with your ring, such as candy that acts like fuel to keep yourself flying, or poles that'll send you shooting off in a number of different directions to either help or impede your progress. Honestly, I find this one to be challenging, but a pretty charming little adventure. If you were to ask me to recommend it to buy, however, I would probably say no. But it's definitely worth a playthrough if you happen to get it in one of the many Sonic compilations that it's in, because it can be pretty fun. Next up on the agenda is yet another Tails spin-off. Yet again with a new gameplay style that might surprise many. This game, ladies and gentlemen, is a Metroidvania. This game takes place on the interesting Coco Island, where Tails resides, toiling away at his research lab. However, one day the island finds itself under attack by the Battle Cuckoo Empire, who are looking for the Chaos Emeralds. And as the only person available to help at the time, our boy Tails leaps into action to defend the land. The gameplay of this one, as I previously mentioned, is a Metroidvania, which essentially means you will be running around the open-ended levels and world as Tails in order to fully explore the environment in order to collect items and power-ups. As you collect more of these, you will gain additional moves and generally will become more and more powerful, with the ultimate goal of finding your way to the big bad guy and defeating him. The gameplay this time around is surprisingly slow-paced, but honestly I find it to be a pretty chill one overall, with enough challenge to keep things interesting throughout. And unlike previous Sonic games, your moveset is determined by equipment that you find lying about on the field. You can return to Tails' home at any time you like to swap out his equipment and plan out what you need in order to progress further in the game. However, for the most part, your default form of attack will most likely be the bombs that Tails can throw, as it's a pretty balanced weapon for the most part. And it will only really get replaced later on when you get, well, better bombs. The health system here is also handled a little bit more traditionally than we've seen before in the series. So you still collect rings to heal up your health. However, all your rings apply as if they're traditional hit points as opposed to the mainline game's method of scattering them upon being damaged. Part of Tails' moveset here is also his ability to fly. At will, our little fox pal can take off and fly about wherever he wants. This sounds like it could be pretty broken, however, and the game has things set in place to help manage this. Essentially, littered throughout each of the levels, there are wind tunnels that will blow about, forcing Tails to go down the routes the developers intend, which is honestly a pretty smart way of dealing with this problem. On top of this, Tails can't fly for very long either, at least initially he can't. As you explore, you will come across Chaos Emeralds littered throughout the game's areas, and collecting these will give you a bump to both your flight capabilities as well as your overall health points. Now, for a game released on the Game Gear, I gotta be honest, this looks crazy. In fact, if I didn't know otherwise, I would possibly be fooled into thinking this was a 16-bit game. The only real giveaway that this is an 8-bit title is mostly just the sound quality. Speaking of which, the soundtrack is also pretty dang chill for this game, I gotta be honest, which suits the atmosphere perfectly. In terms of the level design, I find it to be pretty well done. There's a few moments littered about where I think things could be tweaked and improved, but for the most part, it's honestly a jolly fun trek to explore. Overall, I like this game, and I can easily recommend it to other people looking for something a little different. However, I do feel that the game speed may bother people because this is a pretty slow-moving title. The next entry in the series was also released on the Sega Game Gear, and it's one of the more controversial titles, to say the least. Sonic Labyrinth is a labyrinth exploration style game, as the name implies, and it involves the player maneuvering about various mazes in order to find 3 keys and reach the end before the time runs out. Now, the story for this one is quite a curious tale too. Dr. Eggman sneaks into Sonic's house while he's sleeping and replaces his shoes with super slow sneakers. Now, why Eggman doesn't just kill Sonic while he's asleep, that's absolutely beyond me. The best thing I can think of is maybe the good doctor is a bit of an idiot. He's a genius, but an idiotic one. As you can imagine, due to the plot here, the gameplay is very slow by default, as you can only really walk about the levels at a snail's pace, making for a very tedious experience. Of course, the developers weren't too mean. While the walking speed is nightmarishly slow, you do have access to Sonic's trademark spin dash ability in order to attack enemies, as well as offer a nippier mode of transport. The real issue with this is it's pretty awkward to control for the most part. However, I'll be honest, you can get used to how this all works, but it never stops feeling janky. And it never feels like you're in full control. So yeah, the idea behind this game is a bit of a head scratcher, but the fundamentals of a possibly unique and interesting title are here. Unfortunately, where I find the game really falls apart is just in the level design. To put it bluntly, I don't find the levels fun in the slightest, and out of all the Sonic games up to this point, this is the one that I like the least so far. In fact, the level design way later in the game switches from being simply tedious to being outright frustrating as you progress through the later stages. Throughout the game as well, there are power-ups that can be picked up. And if you're anything like me, you'll want to avoid these things like the plague. Whenever a new power-up is picked up, the background will flash rapidly, which really can be a pain on the eyes, and it hurts my eyes like you wouldn't believe. And it gets even worse if you grab the invincibility power-up, which is it's just a concerning one to grab. If there's anyone that suffers from epilepsy, I'd just stay far, far away from this. I believe, however, this issue is fixed in the 3DS release. Overall, I do not recommend this game at all. I did not really have any fun playing it, to be honest, and I found it to be just a pain to navigate through. Sometimes literally. Oy. Moving on from the Game Gear, now we have a unique little release, as this one was originally an arcade game, in which Sonic and crew beat the ever-loving heck out of each other in order to try to gain the Chaos Emeralds in a competition of power to decide who will be the one to take out the evil Dr. Eggman in his newly built Death Egg Mark II. Interestingly enough, this time around there are 8 Chaos Emeralds to collect. The only reason I can think of this is so that the game has a justification for you to have to fight every other character in the game. And in terms of gameplay mechanics, this isn't the most complicated fighter in the world, and it's honestly super simple to pick up and play. Though the game does offer 2 different gameplay styles to pick from, automatic or manual. Automatic will basically simplify the controls significantly. allowing you to automatically activate special moves just by mashing buttons, while manual will allow you to perform all the moves at will, assuming that you have the know-how on how to do it. The game does offer an in-game way to read the movesets, however, if you are playing this on the Xbox Live or PlayStation 3 versions. Visually, I find this game to be a really super cool looking one. It's definitely early 3D low poly, however, I just find them to be just honestly really cool. The soundtrack is also, oh my lord, oh, it's beautiful. And there's so many awesome tracks present here that I can just listen to all day. Honestly, this is a pretty fun fighting game entry. Now, if you put it on the same level as Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, or something like along those lines, you'll definitely be pretty disappointed. However, I think this is a really cool little title that can be a great time just to mess about with and just play with friends casually. And now we head back to the Sega Mega Drive with a game that's a little bit closer to what we expect from Sonic the Hedgehog. However, it's still a huge change of pace from the default formula. This time the dreaded Eggman has been capturing cute little critters known as Flickies on the wonderful Flicky Island, and it's up to Sonic to free them and defeat the good doctor. The gameplay of this one is closer to that of a traditional Sonic game. However, there are some major differences in how everything is put together and what you have to do overall. For example, instead of simply running through an obstacle course to get to the end, here you must explore all the isometric levels in order to find the bandits and destroy them. And you must destroy every single bandit located in each level in order to grab the Flicky sitting inside and make your way to the dimensional rings that are littered about. So yeah, as you can see, the levels this time around are completely open-ended and isometric. The main idea behind this one is overall just exploration. A big point of contention for folks for this game usually revolves around the game's controls, however. Now for me, I actually find this game controls reasonably well when you get the hang of things. But this is a title where Sonic is super slippery, so precise movement can be fairly awkward from time to time, especially later on when you have to land on specific moving platforms, for example. Generally though, I find the level design for the most part to be very entertaining. There's tons of hidden nooks and crannies to explore, and I just find it a blast to simply do a casual run through every now and then. One of the most interesting key features of this game I find, however, is the new shield type that's offered, the Golden Shield. When you acquire this bad boy, Sonic will gain the ability to use a new ability, the Homing Attack, which will allow him to lock down enemies easily and free the Flickies inside without having to worry about possible issues that may arise from trying to hit them manually. The reason this attack is such an interesting feature to me, however, will be apparent more so from Sonic Adventure onwards, as from that point onwards, the ability will become a primary part of his moveset. The Chaos Emeralds also make their return here too and are accessed simply by collecting 50 rings, and finding either Tails or Knuckles in each of the levels. After you pay them, they will whisk you off to collect one. Although I question why they won't take you unless you pay them money, it seems like a dick move to me, to be honest. The special stages of this one are probably the easiest ones in the entire series. You're on a bridge and you simply collect the rings while avoiding the bombs. And gotta be honest, don't really have much of an opinion on these because they are just stupid easy. I don't think I've ever failed one. You can just turn your brain off and get through. Collecting all of the Chaos Emeralds this time around, however, does not reward you with Super Sonic, unfortunately. At least not in the official release. All grabbing these does is unlock access to the final boss. And the soundtrack to this one too is also best described as spectacular. I honestly adore it. The songs are super catchy to listen to, and I can honestly just be best described as earworms. Overall, I really enjoy this title and I can recommend it. However, I'd be remiss to say that this is one of the more mixed entries in the franchise, so your mileage may vary. The game was also released on the Sega Saturn and PC too, with both of those versions having their own unique differences over the original Mega Drive release. Those versions of the game offer a different soundtrack that's honestly also really good. Though I do prefer the Mega Drive tunes, it's definitely still dope to listen to. There's also overhauled visuals, so the graphics of the game generally have more effects and are way more detailed. The biggest differences, however, lie in the special stages, with the Sega Saturn version offering what can be best described as the Sonic 2 special stage on steroids. You run through a 3D half-pipe, you collect rings, and you simply try to get to the Chaos Emerald at the end. And I absolutely love these special stages too. I find them extremely fun to play, and the whole aesthetic of everything here is just absolutely beautiful. The PC version special stages, however, don't fare quite as well. They are super janky and probably the worst ones to play by far. And generally, I just don't like them. Though they also adopt the half-pipe style of the Sega Saturn stages, it's just done in a very funky way without any of the pretty aesthetics or good control. Out of the 3 versions, the only one I'd say not to really bother with is probably the PC version, unless you don't care about the special stages. Otherwise, I feel that both the console versions are great titles that I can recommend easily. And for those of you who want an even more refined version of the game, one of the original developers released a version you can play on emulators called Sonic 3D Director's Cut, which offers little tweaks and improvements across the game, including a playable Super Sonic. Next up, we have yet another Game Gear release that tries to mimic the art style of titles such as Donkey Kong Country. However, I gotta be honest, this game is probably up there as the worst looking Sonic game outright. Everything simply looks wrong. Almost unfinished looking, if I'm to be perfectly honest, and truthfully, I'm not all that surprised. This sort of art style requires a lot of detail to look good, so lobbing it on a game system that doesn't offer any real way to include the level of detail required, this is bound to look the way it does. So in this game, the evil doctor is up to no good again, surprise surprise, and he shot a laser beam at our hero Sonic as he was enjoying a cheeky nap. However, this didn't work as planned, and the laser hit and shattered a nearby Chaos Emerald, breaking it into 5 different pieces. Eggman, being the cheeky man he is, takes advantage of this and plans to use the Chaos Emerald shards to operate his new air base. The gameplay of this one is your typical Sonic Fest, so there's nothing really new for me to really explain. You run through zones, you collect rings and so on, and the Chaos Emeralds are obtained similarly to how they're handled in Sonic 3, find a giant ring and boom, you access the special stage. Though the special stages in this, much like the rest of the game, are very mega jank and unfinished feeling if I'm to be perfectly honest. However, they are easy enough, so they're pretty harmless, I gotta be honest, albeit very boring. The level design of this game isn't even much to write home about either, to be honest, and I think the real best way to describe how this game feels is, apart from the abysmal art style, it's just a very nothing title. Nothing really memorable at all to be found, although there is the water zone later in the game that is absolutely frustrating and completely unfun in every way. And Sonic's moveset is a little differently here though, as now he is rocking a cheeky double jump, and he's not the only playable character, as our Red Boy Knuckles is also in on the action and is completely playable, and he utilizes his traditional gliding abilities as you would expect to see. To be honest, I don't really recommend this one. I just find it to be a boring and unfun game overall, but nothing really redeeming about it other than having an admittedly ambitious art style, which still looks really, really ugly as a result of the console limitations. Now we find ourselves moving up a generation, however, to the Sega Saturn with an interesting spin-off title that is one of the more well-known entries, Sonic R. So this release is a racing title in which you play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or Amy in order to compete for first place on 5 separate courses, with more characters unlockable as you get through the game. What's curious about this game, however, is unlike most racing games, you are all racing on foot for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, and can utilize different unique attributes and abilities of each of the characters to get through things. For example, Sonic can double jump, Tails can fly, and so on. Of course, this leads to the question, how does the game control? As it's an on-foot racer, you'd probably expect the game to control similar to what you expect any 3D platform to play like, right? Well, nope. The characters all control as if they are a vehicle of sorts, which may take a little bit of getting used to. In fact, the general control for this game is super tricky to get a handle on, and many people criticize them as the characters can initially feel mega jank and hard to point in the direction that you'd like them to face. However, I actually feel the controls in this game aren't too bad once you get used to them and learn exactly how things should be handled. And essentially the key to controlling this game well is to treat each character as if they are a car, making sure to utilize the shoulder buttons as well to make super tight turns. The courses in general are honestly also pretty well designed too, and I feel can be fairly fun to master and plow through. The course design here is far from conventional, as pathways interweave into each other constantly and the player has total freedom to go off-road if they so choose. Essentially each course, apart from maybe the final one, feels like a small little hub to me, and there is a clear direction on where to head, but everything is pretty open-ended. And this is a good thing, because there is a lot more to this game than simply racing. The game takes advantage of the open level design to litter hidden collectibles throughout. As you play, you will come across various Sonic tokens that can be picked up, and collecting all of these will allow you to race against a new character to potentially unlock them for use. And on top of that, we also have the Chaos Emeralds that are hidden throughout the game. Collect all 7 and come in first place, and then boom, you can be supersonic and completely destroy the game's difficulty in the process. Some of these tokens and emeralds are normally found behind special gates that you have to collect a certain number of rings to unlock. So if you want to get everything in one race, you have to be on the ball. Well, at least on the PC and Gems collection releases of the game. On the original Sega Saturn version, you cannot get everything in a single race, as the game won't save the Chaos Emerald tally after you unlock a character. So you'll have to do at least 2 runs of every single course to collect everything. Visually, I love the look of this game too. There's something about early low poly Sonic that I just love visually. The environments all look great and the character models are all pretty nice too. And as for the soundtrack, well, if there's anything people remember from this game, it's the music. And if I'm to be blunt, it's an absolute banger. The biggest issue I can see people having with this one, outside of just adjusting the controls, is probably lack of content. As there's only 5 courses available, you can reasonably get this game completed within an hour. Or if you even know what you're doing, maybe even 30 minutes. Honestly though, I do recommend this game if you're able to find it cheap enough. I genuinely enjoy running through this casually from time to time, and if you have friends to play with too, you can also play this in split screen 2-player on the Saturn, or in 4-player with the PC and Gems collection releases. Overall, I think this is a solid title, though I do recommend it with caution, as I know this is usually considered to be a pretty much a bit of a mixed bag amongst people. And now we hit the absolute final game in the classic era, folks. Sonic Jam is mostly a compilation of Sonic 1, 2, and 3 and Knuckles that was released on the Sega Saturn, and offers admittedly pretty solid ports of the games. Now, while the games themselves are pretty much completely unchanged for the most part, this compilation is notable as it offers a couple of unique features, such as difficulty modes that affect the game's layouts, and in the case of Sonic 1, even adds in the spin dash ability as an extra option. Though the real reason I wanted to talk about this compilation isn't because of the added features to the classic games. Oh no. It's so we can talk about a really cool unique portion that's called Sonic World. This, ladies and gents, is an open world area that you can explore as Sonic in full 3D, as you are able to complete missions, find little hints to the classic Sonic games, and to enter a number of buildings that all have little cool bonuses, such as character bios, concept art, and even animations and trailers. And I gotta give a special nod to the Man of the Year animation because it is just really well done. There's not too much I have to say about this honestly, other than it's a really cool little send-off to this era of the franchise. And these days, I'd say it's probably not really worth picking up outside of sheer curiosity and novelty of it all, as most of the cool stuff here can easily be found online, unless you just want Saturn versions of the classic Sonic games, that is. Although I gotta be honest, the ports here, while fairly well made, do have their odd quirks. For example, some of the sound effects are different, and I honestly don't like how certain things sound here, such as the blue sphere noise, for instance, just sound off and wrong. Overall though, it's a super cool little package that back in the day would have been a fantastic addition to the Sega Saturn library. And here we end the start of this retrospective series. Thank you all for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you enjoyed my little walkthrough through memory lane here as I've been giving my thoughts on everything, and I hope I'll see you guys again in part 2 as we move on to the Dreamcast era of games, as Sonic makes his first proper humongous leap into the 3rd dimension. So with that, thank you all for watching, and I hopefully shall see you all again. Don't be sheepish, people. Bye!